My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 29 years old from New York City, USA. Have you ever trusted someone with your heart and your business, only to realize they were stealing both? What would you do if the man who promised loyalty chose betrayal instead? Would you cry? Would you break? Or would you rise so hard that his entire world collapses while you stand untouched? What if I told you his cheating didn't destroy me? It activated me. What if every lie he told became a brick in the empire I rebuilt alone? Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll see how losing him was the most profitable decision of my life. I used to believe that loyalty had a look, a sound, a feeling. And he had mastered all three. In meetings, he sat beside me like my biggest supporter, nodding at every idea I shared, telling everyone how brilliant I was, how none of this company would exist without my vision. At home, he played the same role, asking about my day, pretending to care about the stress on my shoulders, reminding me that we were a team. That word, team. He used it so often that I stopped questioning anything. I stopped checking numbers. I stopped double-reading contracts. I trusted him with access, with passwords, with influence, with my heart. And that was the mistake. What I didn't realize back then was that while I was building the company outward, clients, brand image, growth, he was building something else quietly behind my back. An illusion. He knew exactly when to praise me in public so no one would ever suspect him. He knew when to act small so I would feel big enough to protect him. He let me shine because shadows are easiest to hide behind bright light, and I was glowing. Every success we had, he made sure people associated it with us, not me. We decided, we agreed, we're building something special. Slowly, my identity started dissolving into a shared narrative, and I didn't fight it because I thought love meant merging. I thought partnership meant compromise. I didn't notice how often my name was missing from emails, how my authority was softened in meetings, how junior executives started coming to him for approval instead of me. By the time I felt something was off, the structure had already shifted. At home, the cracks were invisible but constant. Late nights that didn't make sense, calls he'd take in the other room. A phone always face down. If I asked, he'd smile and say, "Business, babe, you know how it is." And I did know, or at least I thought I did. I was too busy trying to prove that I could be both a powerful executive and an understanding partner. I didn't want to be the woman who doubted, who questioned, who demanded. So I swallowed my instincts and called it maturity. But here's the thing nobody tells you: betrayal doesn't start with cheating. It starts with entitlement. He felt entitled to my trust, my work, my silence. He felt entitled to take pieces of what I built because he stood next to me while I built it. And the more I trusted him, the bolder he became. He began positioning himself as the reasonable one whenever I pushed back in meetings. He'd soften my strong decisions, reframe my boundaries as emotional reactions. People listened. Why wouldn't they? He was calm. He was charming. He was believable. I remember one specific moment that still burns in my chest. We were in a board discussion, and I laid out a strategy I had worked on for months. He waited, let me finish. Then smiled and said, "What Sarah is trying to say is," and re-explained my entire plan like it had just occurred to him. The room nodded. Someone congratulated him on the insight. He squeezed my knee under the table like a private joke. I smiled back because that's what strong women are taught to do. Don't make a scene, don't look insecure. Inside, something cracked. Looking back, that was the illusion at its peak. Everyone thought he was my backbone. In reality, he was slowly becoming the face, while I carried the weight. I was still the engine, but he was learning how to sit in the driver's seat. And the scariest part, he made me feel guilty for even noticing. If I questioned him, he'd say I was stressed. If I challenged him, he'd say I was changing. If I asked for clarity, he'd say I didn't trust him anymore. And he was right about one thing: I didn't. Not fully, I just didn't know why yet. What I didn't see then was that the perfect partner illusion wasn't just for me. It was for everyone watching: investors, employees, friends, even family. He needed them to believe in him so that when the truth eventually surfaced, I'd look like the problem. The emotional one, The bitter one, the woman who couldn't separate love from business. That illusion was his shield, and at the time I was unknowingly holding it up for him, but illusions don't last forever. They crack under pressure. And the same loyalty he pretended to have was the very thing that exposed him later. I just didn't know it yet. At that stage, all I knew was that something precious was being quietly stolen from me, and it wasn't just my relationship. It was my power. The truth didn't arrive gently. It didn't knock. It didn't warn me. It crashed into my life on an ordinary evening when I wasn't even looking for answers. That's how betrayal works. It finds you when you're tired, when your guard is down, when you still believe the lie. I was scrolling through numbers on my laptop, half listening to the shower running, when a notification popped up on his tablet sitting beside me. I wasn't snooping. I didn't need to. The message preview was enough. A name I didn't recognize. A sentence that didn't belong to business. My stomach dropped before my mind could catch up. At first, I told myself it was nothing. I wanted it to be nothing. I wanted logic to rescue me the way it always had. But logic failed me that night. One message turned into another, then another. Words turned into patterns. Patterns turned into proof. And suddenly, the man I had defended, trusted, protected, and empowered was standing naked in front of the truth, just not physically. Emotionally, morally, professionally. The cheating hurt, but that wasn't the deepest cut. What shattered me was realizing that while he was betraying me emotionally, he was also betraying me strategically. Hidden emails. Side conversations. Financial decisions I never approved. Meetings I was too busy to attend. I started connecting dots that had been scattered on purpose. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. A double life built on my blind faith. I remember sitting there in silence, the house suddenly too quiet, my heart pounding so loudly it felt like the walls could hear it. I didn't cry right away. Shock doesn't look like tears, it looks like stillness. My mind replayed every moment I had ignored, every time my intuition whispered and I told it to be quiet, every time I chose peace over truth. And in that stillness, something shifted. The woman who wanted answers died. The woman who needed strategy was born. When I confronted him, he didn't panic. That's what scared me most, he sighed. Sat down, rubbed his face like I was the inconvenience. He admitted the affair like it was an HR issue, cold, detached, almost rehearsed. And when I pressed further, when I asked about the accounts, the contracts, the meetings he kept secret, his tone changed. Defensive, sharp. He said I was overreacting, that it wasn't what I thought. That business required flexibility. That word again. The same words he used every time he crossed a line. That was the moment the truth fully hit me, not like sadness, but like fire. He didn't feel guilty because he didn't think he did anything wrong. In his mind, I was emotional, distracted, replaceable. He thought I needed him more than he needed me. And that assumption, that arrogance, that's what sealed his fate. He underestimated the one thing he should have feared, my clarity. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't threaten. I listened. I watched, I memorized everything. Because when someone thinks they've won, they get careless. He started talking, explaining, justifying. And in his need to feel superior, he revealed more than he realized. Names, dates, decisions. I stored it all away, not in anger, but in precision. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I was awake. The next morning I looked at him differently, not as a partner, not as a lover, as a liability, and that changes everything. I stopped reacting and started observing. I smiled when he talked. I nodded when he lied. I played the role he expected, the wounded woman trying to process betrayal. Inside, I was auditing my own life, my company, my contracts, my leverage. I realized that the same access I had given him so freely could be reclaimed, with interest. The betrayal forced me to accept a painful truth. Love had made me generous, but generosity without boundaries is dangerous. I had confused trust with surrender. And now, standing in the ashes of that realization, I had a choice. Collapse or recalibrate. Most people think revenge starts with rage. It doesn't. It starts with restraint, with patience. with letting your enemy believe they're still in control. That moment of discovery wasn't the end of my story. It was the ignition. Because once you see the truth clearly, you can never be manipulated the same way again. And while he thought he had shattered me, what he really did was remove the last excuse I had for holding back. Silence became my greatest weapon. Not the angry kind, not the cold shoulder, but the kind of silence that makes people underestimate you. I didn't announce my pain. I didn't expose his lies. I didn't even change my routine in a way anyone could notice. On the surface, I was still the same woman, focused, composed, cooperative. But underneath that calm exterior, I was rebuilding myself piece by piece, and this time I wasn't building with trust. I was building with awareness. I started by stepping back just enough to see the whole board. For the first time, I looked at my own company as if I were an outsider. Who really held influence? Who benefited from which decisions? Where had my authority been diluted without my consent? I spent nights reviewing contracts I had once skimmed because I trusted the man sitting beside me. I reread clauses with new eyes. Some were careless, some were intentional, all of them were fixable. I reached out to mentors I hadn't spoken to in years. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just quietly. Coffee meetings, late calls. Short questions with long implications. I listened more than I spoke. People love to talk when they think you're vulnerable. They reveal things they never would when they think you're strong. And slowly the picture sharpened. I realized I wasn't isolated. I had been isolated. While he assumed I was recovering, I was learning the legal terrain. Learning where the company was exposed. Learning how he positioned himself in conversations when I wasn't in the room. I discovered that my absence had been used as a tool against me. So I removed that tool. I began showing up again, but differently. Quieter, sharper, less emotional, more deliberate. I let him speak first in meetings, let him show his hand. Confidence makes people sloppy. At home, I played the role he expected. Hurt but forgiving, confused but trying, he relaxed. He believed the storm had passed. That belief cost him everything later. Because while he thought he had control, I was rebuilding my foundation somewhere he couldn't reach, my independence. I separated finances carefully. I created documentation trails. I secured my intellectual property. Every move was legal, clean, invisible. I also rebuilt myself internally. Betrayal messes with your sense of worth if you let it. I refused to let that happen. I went back to the woman I was before love softened my edges. The woman who trusted her instincts, who didn't apologize for clarity, who knew her value without needing reassurance. I worked harder but not louder, stronger but not showier. Power doesn't need an announcement. What surprised me most was how empowering restraint felt. I wasn't reacting anymore, I was responding. There's a difference. Reaction is emotional, response is strategic, and strategy is where I've always thrived. Each quiet step I took rebuilt not just my position, but my confidence. I stopped seeing myself as someone who had been wronged and started seeing myself as someone who had been redirected. People around us noticed a shift, but they couldn't name it. I was calmer. More focused, less accessible. He mistook that for weakness, for healing, for acceptance. He had no idea that every smile I gave him was a countdown. Every nod was a calculation. Every day of silence was another brick in the empire I was reclaiming. By the time he realized I wasn't broken, it was already too late. Because the most dangerous woman in the room is the one who has nothing left to lose and everything left to build. The shift didn't happen overnight. It never does when it's done right. By the time I made my first real move, I already knew exactly how he would react, because I had studied him the same way he once studied me. His habits, his ego, his blind spots. He believed charm could fix anything. He believed people trusted him because they liked him, and he believed I would never go against him publicly. That belief was the door I walked through. I started where he felt safest. Process. Small changes that looked harmless on the surface. Restructuring workflows, clarifying approval chains. Updating compliance requirements under the excuse of future-proofing the company. No drama, No confrontation, just policy. And policy is powerful because it doesn't argue, it enforces. Slowly, the informal control he enjoyed began slipping through his fingers. Meetings he once led casually now required documentation. Decisions he made verbally now needed written confirmation. He didn't notice at first. He thought it was bureaucracy. He didn't realize it was a net tightening around him. At the same time, I aligned quietly with people he underestimated. Legal counsel who remembered whose vision built the company. Senior managers who had felt sidelined by his rising influence. Investors who respected results more than personality. I didn't accuse him. I didn't attack his character. I presented facts, timelines, numbers, risk assessments. When you let other people reach the conclusion on their own, they defend it like it was their idea. The real checkmate began when I separated identity from access. Titles can be misleading, but permissions never are. I reviewed who could sign what, who could authorize spending, who could negotiate on behalf of the company. Where things had been vague, I made them precise. Where power had been shared emotionally, I reassigned it legally. Every change followed protocol. Every step had precedent. If he challenged it, he'd expose himself, so he stayed quiet. And silence, this time, worked against him. He tried to regain control the only way he knew how, by accelerating. Riskier deals, bigger promises, fast moves without full backing. He wanted to look indispensable. Instead, he looked reckless. The same people who once praised his confidence now questioned his judgment. I didn't have to push. Gravity did the work. All I had to do was make sure there was a clear contrast between us, my calm consistency against his growing instability. Then came the moment he didn't see coming. An audit, routine on paper. Devastating in reality, not because I manipulated the results, but because I made sure nothing was hidden anymore. All the side arrangements, all the unofficial understandings. All the shortcuts he took because he thought loyalty would protect him. They surfaced one by one, stripped of excuses, and suddenly the room felt different. The air changed, trust evaporated. He looked at me during that meeting, searching for the woman who used to protect him. She was gone. In her place sat someone he didn't recognize, focused, composed, unreadable. I didn't enjoy his discomfort. I didn't need to. Power isn't loud when it's real. It just is. And in that moment, the company didn't need to choose between us. The structure already had. The fallout was swift but clean. Removal from decision-making roles. Financial responsibility reassigned. Partnerships dissolved. No scandal. No spectacle, just consequences. He tried to frame it as betrayal, but that word no longer belonged to him. Betrayal implies loyalty once existed. What happened was accountability. What struck me most was how alone he became once the illusion collapsed. The same people who laughed with him, defended him, followed his lead, they stepped back. Not because they were cruel, but because confidence without integrity doesn't hold weight for long. Meanwhile, my position solidified. Not because I demanded it, but because I earned it again, this time without compromise. That was the real revenge. Not watching him fall, but realizing I no longer needed to watch at all. The company was stable, my vision was intact, and the power he once borrowed from me, it had returned, stronger, clearer, and fully mine. I thought the final moment would feel dramatic, loud. Emotional, like something out of a movie, but it didn't. It was quiet, almost peaceful. By the time everything settled, there was no grand confrontation, no last argument, no victory speech. There was just distance and clarity, the kind that comes when chaos finally leaves your life. He tried to reach out at first, messages that sounded casual but felt desperate. Questions disguised as concern, apologies that arrived too late and asked for too much. I didn't respond. Not out of bitterness, but because I had already said everything that mattered through my actions. Silence, once again, said more than words ever could. I had moved on not just emotionally but strategically, and that kind of distance can't be crossed with regret. The reality hit him slowly. Deals stopped coming. Calls went unanswered. Doors that used to open automatically stayed closed. Reputation is a fragile thing in the corporate world, and once it cracks, it echoes. People didn't turn against him because of me. They turned away because they finally saw what had always been there: opportunism dressed as confidence, ambition without accountability. When the spotlight shifted, there was nothing solid underneath. Meanwhile, my life expanded in ways I hadn't imagined. New partnerships formed, healthier, clearer, built on mutual respect instead of emotional leverage. My role evolved from fighting for authority to being trusted with it. I no longer had to prove myself in rooms I had built. The energy I once spent managing him now went into innovation, growth, and vision. Success felt different this time. Lighter, cleaner, fully mine. What surprised me most was how little satisfaction I felt watching him lose everything. I expected anger to linger, resentment to demand attention, but it didn't. Because real victory isn't seeing someone else suffer, it's realizing they no longer matter to your future. His bankruptcy, his isolation, his regret, those were consequences, not goals. My goal had always been freedom. I learned that betrayal can either trap you in bitterness or propel you into alignment. I chose alignment. I chose myself. I chose the version of my life that didn't require permission, apology, or protection. And in doing so, I reclaimed more than a company. I reclaimed my voice, my standards, and my sense of worth. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this: losing the wrong person can be the greatest gain of your life. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I refused to lose myself. And standing where I am now, strong, independent, and unbothered, I understand something clearly for the first time. The moment he betrayed me was the moment I became unstoppable. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video so more people who need this message can find it. Subscribe to the channel if you believe in stories of resilience, power, and real-life comebacks. And comment below, have you ever turned betrayal into a breakthrough? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Stay with us, because this isn't just entertainment, this is empowerment.